All right. I'm just waiting for my Facebook screen to pop open so that I can make sure that I am seeing any chats or comments. All right. So welcome to all of you at home. I am Santa Buckles. I'm the PR and Development Specialist person at Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. Every month we do these lunch and learns, really just trying to make sure that we're spreading awareness and information to those that may need it. And if this doesn't help you, maybe it helps someone that you know. So please share as much as possible. Joining us today, today we are talking about LBGTQ rights. And joining us today is Free State Legal, right? Free State Legal?
Free State Justice.
Free State Justice. Did it used to be
Free State Legal?
I knew there was a reason why I keep saying that wrong. And I was wondering what happened to me. So thank you for that correction. Free State Justice. Let's just do a quick intro. I guess let me start with Pauline and then Emily and then Lauren, because I'm going to have you do the deep dive into what Free State does. So Pauline.
Hi, I'm Pauline Mandel, Director of Legal Services at Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. So nice to see you.
Thanks. Emily?
Hi, my name is Emily Thorner. I'm a paralegal with Free State Justice.
Perfect. And Lauren?
Hi, my name is Lauren Pruitt, and I'm the Legal Director of Free State Justice. And just to tell you a little bit about what Free State does, we are a legal advocacy organization that seeks to improve the lives of low-income LGBTQIA+ Marylanders. The low-income LGBTQ population continues to struggle with legal challenges such as harassment, complex family law issues, and anti-LGBTQ discrimination in employment, housing, healthcare, foster care, and public accommodations. So we assist folks with finding pro bono representation, as well as Free State has a robust advocacy segment. We work on a lot of impact litigation, legislation, and coalition building. So our mission is to combine direct legal services with education and outreach to ensure that the low-income LGBTQ+ community of Maryland receives fair treatment in law and society. And as Sandra mentioned, we were a merger between Free State Legal Project and Equality Maryland, which was established to assist with getting same-sex marriage passed, which was passed first in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. I was super proud of that. Perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren. So I guess just really quickly, you several times said low income. So there is an income requirement for receiving services from your organization, correct?
Correct. So we follow the general guidelines as far as, with any kind of state service, but that's a mandate based on we receive funding from, various organizations and the state of Maryland itself, but we can take cases that are over income. It just depends on the particular type of case and what is needed. And so we can make those judgments accordingly. The only thing that is kind of a requirement is that is the LGBTQ side. So in order to take cases, it has to arise from your being a member of that particular community. But if anyone else reaches out, because you're, just looking for it, answer to a legal question, we are happy to refer folks. We love for folks to come to us to ask questions and not kind of the bus driver or the hairstylist. And we will assist you. If we don't know, we will find out.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, and I guess for us, you guys, it sounds like you are doing mostly civil types of work with your clients. So
Yes.
Our piece of it is we represent anybody who's a victim of crime, but especially with the LGBTQ community, a lot of what we do with them, if they are witnesses or victims in crime, we work with them to protect their rights, and especially privacy, which is, I know, a huge concern, intimidation. We see a lot of intimidation, harassment, and those kind of issues that come in. So, that's probably what I see us do more of than anything else. It's just when they go to court to protect them and make sure that their rights are preserved and they're safe, really. So.
Absolutely. And we did a previous lunch and learn on hate crime specifically. And although we had a family on that was that had a race-based crime, hate crime, the rules still apply for the LBGTQ community. And so if you are watching from home, we're not going to talk too much about that. We will towards the end here. But there is a whole entire lunch and learn episode about that. So if someone is watching and feels that, hate crimes are happening to them or what have you, please take a look at that. And then, reach out to whoever you feel most comfortable to. We're happy to work with Free State and vice versa. So, however we receive clients and however we can help, we're more than happy to, take clients through different venues. So one of the things that Lauren and I and Emily were talking about when we kind of did like a pre-meet was intimate partner violence, so domestic violence, ever since that conversation, I've really thought about our conversation because I don't think that I ever thought about what it looks like for someone that's in an LBGTQ relationship or in a situation where violence occurs. Sometimes it's same sex, sometimes it's maybe one real femme partner, maybe one really kind of masculine partner, one tall partner, one black partner, one white. There's just so many different combinations. And Lauren, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about that because one of the things that you talked about was bias that is implied by different places, organizations, or what have you. And so I just wanted you to give us more information on that. And then if Pauline or Emily want to tack in, we can do that. But how I have it written is we're going to talk about intimate partner violence. What does it look like? How does bias affect outcomes, especially in dealing with the police or gender roles?
Sure. No, that's a great question and a perfect place to start. And so you kind of have to look at how domestic violence was first sold. And in order to get buy-in, they really had to kind of focus on this model victim, kind of a meek, smaller, statured woman, and then obviously the aggressor, the kind of the big strapping man. And so that's how you got buy-in from society that domestic violence is a thing, that, it can be found in marriages. And obviously that was kind of a great movement in the protection of folks in a relationship from abuse. But what we have seen in the LGBTQ plus community is that if our relationships don't look like the typical victim and the typical aggressor, the police who are called, who show up, don't know who to arrest. When the judges are looking at the two individuals, they're not immediately able to ascertain who was the victim and who's the aggressor. And so what we see is a lot of dual arrests. So, you have, both parties, and that could include someone who was being victimized by the aggressor now being arrested. A lot of times, arrest will lead to either, I just want to get out of custody, or I'm told by an attorney to, that the best thing I can do is to plead guilty to this lesser crime. But what ends up happening is the victim now has something on their record based on, their own abuse, basically. We also see cross complaints that come in the form of protective orders. So again, because you don't have that typical victim, typical aggressor, both will be advised to file a protective order. And depending on, not having, evidence in a way that can, prove your complaint or prove that, you have been the victim. And the reason you generally have that is because even less than kind of the normal victim who is going to be hesitant to call the police. Folks in the LGBTQ plus community, because of past victimization, because of generally bad incidents with police and law enforcement in general, they have even lesser kind of incentive to call the police on a partner, and so they're going to have less evidence to back up their claims as far as who is the actual victim in the particular relationship. So and then what we see is that you have victims who now have criminal records, who now have protective orders on their record. It makes it difficult for them to find employment, for them to find housing away from the aggressor. So we see them being put in a position where, if they kind of want to keep the status quo as far as their living situation, they put up with even more and more abuse because they have just less chances to get away. And then when we move to looking at shelters and possibly emergency housing, especially if you're a trans victim, you may not be able to be placed in housing based on your gender identity. They may want to place you in housing based on your sex assigned at birth, which could put you in other risks for your health and well-being. And then you may not have ID that match. So there's just all these kind of layers which make it very difficult for folks in this community to receive adequate assistance. And I think it starts with kind of training the officers who are arriving. And I think we all know that domestic violence situations are the most dangerous for police officers. So they're on the highest alert, and they're obviously not the judge and don't have to figure out who did what. So when it's not real evident, there's not particular signs of of who the aggressor was in either way, or a witness that's credible and believable, a lot of times they'll just arrest both folks.
That's interesting. We've experienced also the other piece of that, because sometimes we have a male who is actually not the aggressor, but the female who's the aggressor, but the male is the one who continues to be charged when so it's kind of the same type of issue. We had someone who was run over by a woman, and fortunately we had a witness who actually saw her chasing him with a car, and her allegations were that he was beating her up and all these other things, but she finally got charged, but she had pressed charges about 30 times against him, which were not true. But because there is the bias, and that's what you're talking about too, is this ingrained bias by police departments and other people. There's always this tendency to look at the male person as the bad guy, kind of thing. So and that's not always true in those relationships. And certainly when you're starting to talk about LGBTQ relationships, those are very different too. So you have to have some, think about the whole universal picture before you start charging people and those kind of things. So you're 100% right about that. So
yeah, and since I've been with Maryland Crime Victims, I remember there's an organization, I want to say it's called like My Brother's Keeper or something like that, but it's about men with who are domestic violence, like they are the non-aggressor in the situation, and this woman, she lost her brother to domestic violence, and so she was trying to raise awareness, and I did a social media post, the Johnny Depp trial, which really kind of like opened people's eyes, even though it was like it was back and forth. But I think that you think of this guy he's not known as being very feminine. I mean, he's known as being a man's man, where things were not great, and so it was just a different perspective where people were like, oh yeah, and you're going, duh, yeah, I mean. But unfortunately, it takes that big person, and so I was super proud of him for kind of raising that awareness, because it really started more conversations that need to be had,
Yeah.
these conversations even that we're having now, they need to be had. I think that the more that we raise that awareness, like, you can kind of open your eyes a little bit wider each time. And we may not be perfect walking through life, but the more we learn, the more we can help others. And so we also did a lunch and learn on domestic violence. Lauren, a couple times you mentioned evidence. And so I am going to also refer back to that. One of our lessons learned in the domestic violence, and there was a stalking lunch and learn that we did, was talking about people really keeping that evidence. And I go back to the Johnny Depp trial, because they, what's her name? Amber Heard, right? Is her name. And she's like all these photos that she was like turning in, and I'm not saying that some of those were right. If you watched any of that, it seemed a little overboard, but I mean, she had photos every time like he passed out, or every time something was broken, she took pictures of it. She, wrote it down, like she was keeping a record, so that one day she would have that. And it really stinks to have to plan ahead and think ahead like that. But technology allows us to do that. We have our phones, we have, notes in our phones, we have, you can record things. And it definitely sounds like those are extremely important in any case. But I think particularly when there is a bias, hopefully, those will help the person. So throwing you guys back to another lunch and learn on that, and definitely appreciate anything, all the information that you shared, Lauren. Like I said, when we had the conversation, I think I walked away going, wow, I never really thought of that, as far as like, the police kind of having that bias and maybe kind of like taking sides. I mean, they've got to make the call on, on the spot, and, tensions are high, and maybe doing the right thing is charging both for them because they just don't know, and there is no evidence. Whereas if there was that evidence there, clearly, you can sway things in your favor. So Emily, was there anything that you wanted to add to any of that, or?
I'd like to ask Lauren, what do you think the officer training would look like that would encourage fair treatment?
I think, and I'm sure they do some training on this, but I think all of us could use just a real focused or detailed training on implicit bias. And because
Very
we
good
all
point.
know, I mean, if you're biased against something and it's and you know it, you may not care, so you may not, you will follow those actions because that is your bias, or that is the way you stereotype, and it's out in the open. But what's important for folks to know is when they have bias that they don't know. And so there's obvious ones about race or the LGBTQ plus community, or, the difference, like I said, between like kind of a meek, small woman and, a big, stronger guy. But those ones that could be about, kind of believing folks that are just like you, right? Or come from a similar background. Like that's the witness that you're going to believe, as out of a group of witnesses that are telling you what happened. Or just, again, bias is about like a person with a disability. Oh, they couldn't be the abuser in this particular relationship. So, or this person's taking care of a person with a disability, so there's no way that they're abusing them. So there's all these different, ways in which we treat folks differently, or we fill in information about a particular person. And obviously sometimes that can save your life, like, just filling in the information that this stove could be hot is going to keep me from touching it. But when I'm doing it about an individual, that's really not helpful. And I have to like remind, we should all remind ourselves to slow down. If we're making an assumption, just slow down and ask ourselves why we are assuming that this person is the aggressor. Why did we put this individual in handcuffs as soon as we got to the scene, and this person has just been taken off to the side to get, to just ask them some questions or talk to them. Why did we make those assumptions about who was the danger and who wasn't? And I think for police officers, that could be extremely helpful. I think in the some of the recent trials against officers, it has come up, they've really kind of talked about, something being a risk to the officer and something being a threat to the officer. And
Right.
so you really want to consider why, you immediately jump to the threat and are not just ascertaining something as possibly a risk.
Mhm. I think those are all really good points. We do work with police officers and we do training, so it might be really good for us to talk about possibly working some of this stuff into the trainings that we do, because we do go out and work with different police forces and sheriff's offices and all that across the state. So, but I think it's a really good idea to try to work something into that, because the whole idea of bias is, like you said, people need to be aware of it, so
Right.
when they walk in, it's in their head. Okay, so why am I doing this? Or what is this scenario? Or give me 5 minutes to look at this and figure it out, and not just immediately jump into a pattern. So I
Mhm.
think that's so important. And a lot of people don't even think about it. They really don't. They don't even think about it at all. So
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like that takes a lot more inward reflection as to
mhm,
like what you and it just depends on the person, right? I am one of those that I'm always over analyzing myself because that's just like the person that I am. So I'll be like, why did I do? Why did I think that? Why did I feel this way? But if you're not that person that does a lot of that, like you might not catch that.
mhm,
So I definitely like that like you mentioned, like as soon as you said it, you're like, you might not even know you have a bias.
that's right.
And I think that that's such a strong like statement, because I think that, our lives make us who we are. And sometimes you just, like you don't even know that you have something going on. And yeah, no, I love the idea of kind of including that. I do know that MCVRC does a lot of in-services for. So Pauline, we can definitely talk offline, or
Yeah.
you have Lauren's info. So if you need that. All right, so I'm going to move on to this big hot topic for us has been the child sex abuse changes that have been going on.
Mhm.
And we have been kind of pushed into that. Our executive director, Kurt Wolfgang, has been super involved with what's been going on at the Baltimore Archdiocese and the big report that was released. And it's and so that's been going on in addition to legislation that is being modified, which I think is huge. And I think that'll be huge for the LBGTQ community. And so I'll let, again, Lauren, you just take the stage, and then, Pauline can back in, but we're
Mhm.
talking about how that could affect the LBGTQ community. And also as far as like MCVRC is concerned, we're definitely interested on the criminal side to make sure that people are held accountable. But let's just hop into LBGTQ community and the child sex abuse charges and the statute of limitations, because that means that there's no longer going to be a 20-year statute of limitations on filing charges against someone who has abused a child in the sexual capacity. And I think that the huge thing with that is, it takes a lot of time for us to deal with trauma. If you are 10 years old and trauma occurs, you have to be ready by the time you're 30, or else you've missed the opportunity. Or if it happened when you were 5 and you're now 25 and trying to live your life and figure out what's going on, then you've missed the boat at 26, and that's tough, because trauma is hard, especially when you're young and you can't process ideas and concepts. So I'm going to open up the floor to conversation on that and what we think, we can do to help the LGBTQ community as we kind of sort through, these new changes.
Okay, well, one of the things I was going to say, just to kind of qualify, is what you're talking about is that there has been a change in civil litigation. When you're talking about civilly going after someone, they have taken away the statute of limitations, and there used to be one. So if you are anyone who has been sexually abused, there is no longer any statute of limitations on the civil side in the state of Maryland now. So anybody could file irregardless of a time frame. So I think that's what you were referring to.
And I think, so first, I kind of want to, the research on the relationship with being LGBTQ plus and being a victim of child sexual abuse is not definitive. And I don't want folks to think that, because I know that's kind of a, I don't know,
Right.
stereotype or a trope that that's how it starts. So I want to avoid that. But I will say that LGBTQ plus population are, there's definitely like statistics that suggest that they suffer a higher rate of abuse, generally because they are less likely to go to law enforcement, less likely to have supportive families to report abuse to. They are, typically depending on, issues at home and support at home, can be, manipulated by an adult, in various forms, whether it's, sports or, like a coach or a teacher or in the church or a family member. So, this is obviously something that we are definitely concerned with, and hope that it highlights that, if something did happen, regardless of how long ago it was, that you have a right to confront your accuser. And, as long as the victim isn't deceased, or if the,
Right.
some later change to the constitutionality of the legislation, this is something that, we hope to see that folks can use to ensure that they get their day in court, and that hopefully, if this person is still victimizing children, that it is brought to light in some way, which it's possible it couldn't have been through a criminal case, but possibly through a civil case. And, as we've seen, there is no perfect victim. And I think a lot of times folks are looking for that, or looking to be that. Like, why didn't I come right out and tell someone? Why didn't I, keep, whatever, evidence that there may have been, if I didn't tell anyone, did it happen? And, with E.G. and Carol, we have seen kind of a change in how we talk about victims, and that there is no perfect victim, and, scream or no scream, you still could have been sexually assaulted. So I think this will be very important for the LGBTQ and victims, and just protecting children in general. And so at Free State, we are going to look into how we can support any, increased calls that we have. We'll find out which local law firms are working on this issue, so that we have kind of a referral pipeline, as, or in the case that we see an increase in calls on this topic.
For us, what we're looking at obviously is if there are still of the people that were listed in the Attorney General's report, if there still are some people who are around who could be actually criminally charged. And so, we're working with some of the victims of Keogh and other places, and pushing the Attorney General's office to start filing some, some criminal charges against these people. So our piece of it is to work with anybody who's interested in pursuing criminal charges, as far as, and also working with agencies who are doing the civil piece, so that we can kind of work hand in hand. So, but I know you brought up a couple of times the fear that, a lot of the community has in the police, and actually going to court, or putting themselves out there in a situation where they can be identified. And so one of the things that we do as attorneys who are representing victims in court is to make sure that, their rights are observed, but not even that, just the ability to keep them safe and, protect their privacy, protect who they are, and all of those things. So if they want to pursue it, they don't have to be afraid of, their harassment and coming out and all those other things. So, so you've got to look at those parts of the situation too. So it will be interesting to see how many people actually come forward, and how many are too concerned or too afraid or don't want to do it. And obviously, we're not out there to push people to do something that they are worried or concerned about doing, but we are there to, like I said, protect them and make sure that their rights are observed, and, just make sure that we can keep them as safe as possible. So we work on, one of the cases we had recently was we had one around Christmas time where we had two gay gentlemen who were standing on a corner minding their own business, and I don't know, something erupted and guy pulled a gun on him. Well, so the case went to court. He was charged, and so the two victims, the defense attorney was trying to get their names, addresses, and all this other information from them. And the judge ordered them to do that, which is against the law, actually, in the state of Maryland. They can't do that. So one of our attorneys stepped in, and we ended up going to the Court of Special Appeals to get stop, put an injunction against the court order, so they didn't have to reveal names, addresses, or anything else to the defense's side. So, so they were able to kind of, walk away in terms of their identity. I mean, obviously they were subpoenaed to show up in court and they had a name, but they didn't have to reveal where they lived or any of those other things. So we were trying to keep them, their situation as private as we could. So, that's when we talk about victim rights and we talk about their rights, to privacy and not to be harassed, and, they have choices that they can make in terms of whether they want to go forward with cases or that kind of thing. And one of our jobs is really to sit down and talk to them about that beforehand, so they understand what the laws are, what we can do, and, and then they can make choices as to whether or not they want to go forward, so, but, it's difficult.
And I think that's important for most victims, is to feel supported,
Right.
to feel, believed. I think that's, there's been a lot of work in, how victims are interviewed. I remember in law school, one of the first things that kind of struck me is that, in a criminal case, the victim is like witness number one. And so if you're, the victim of a sexual assault or rape, and, now you're just kind of witness to your own, victimization, it just takes something out of the whole process for the victim. And so having organizations, like yours that support victims, and teach, folks what their rights are, it empowers them. And that's what's going to give them, the ability to step up after years and either bring a civil claim or ask the state to bring a criminal action. And again, it can just be so important. And in other states, we've seen kind of mixed reviews when
Really?
they open these revival windows. I think in New York, they opened it up for like 2 years. They saw like 11,000 cases. They did the same in New Jersey. There was only like 1,200 cases. So we really will have to see. But when you have organizations that are putting the information out to the public, that's what you need, and how the process works and what they need to do, and you'll have good results, even if it's 5 cases. Those will be 5 successful.
Right, exactly.
And that's crazy. I mean, that's a huge number, and those are just the people that were ready and prepared. I mean, there's still tons that are
people who are made
I mean, there's still, it's still Uncle Johnny or Aunt Susie or whatever, and
father
father
so and so.
I mean, it's it's still coach of the basketball team, and you're still with them, or whatever the relationship is. It's so complex because you're kind of like turning everything upside down. And that means, do you still have a family? Do you still have a team? Do you still have a whatever?
Well, and I think with the Catholic Church, it's a Catholic guilt. I went to Catholic school for many years.
I am
so-
also a
so-
Catholic, so I
So
completely
we have
understand.
the whole Catholic guilt thing, who rats on the
Hence
priest
my
and the nun, you know what I
self-reflection.
mean? Come on now. So first you
Yeah.
have to get over that, and realize that, yeah, he might be a priest, but that doesn't mean he was right,
These things are not okay.
Yeah, those things are
And-
not okay. So, I mean, there's a lot of people who at this point might just be realizing that based on,
Yeah, and
based
gone
on
is the time that
publicity
you
and
have
stuff,
to kind of live in that guilt and be so self-blaming all the time. Like those are things from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's old mentality, and we're no longer living there. And it's gonna hopefully make things right for so many people that have been wanting the justice, and those that have just been trying to sweep it under the carpet. They know that there's an option. There's an option when they're ready, when they're ready.
right?
And so, but also I wanted to make sure that I thanked Lauren for clarifying that in no way did I mean to intend that any LBGTQ lifestyles were in any way caused by child sex abuse or anything like that. That was definitely not an intention. So I thank you for clarifying that. That was not something that was on my radar, because it just doesn't even connect for me. But I think that it was just a matter of us bringing information to the whole and making sure that the LGBTQ community knows where to go when the time comes, if they're ready to deal with those situations, if it occurred to them. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up is Pauline immediately was talking about the statute of limitations and how that's for civil litigation. What are we thinking about criminal charges? Like, are we hoping? Is there something on the horizon? Are we going to try to push forward
No,
to
there is
open that
no,
up as
there is
well?
no at least my discussion with Kurt was there is no statute of limitations on that. So, I mean, people can
criminal?
charge criminally. The problem that you're going to run into if you're talking about the Attorney General's report is a lot of those people are not around to be charged,
Right, but not
But-
just that case,
but-
like in
but-
other cases.
But there are, but yeah, oh yeah, I mean, you can always, they can be charged. I mean, the problem that you run into when you get into the criminal side of all of it is sometimes it's with prosecutors and whether or not they feel they're going to have enough information or evidence or whatever, from
Absolutely.
10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago. The case they just did in New York with Trump, one of the reasons that lady was successful, and again, that was a civil case, but one of the reasons she was successful is because she actually talked to a couple of her girlfriends or in like the time period when it happened and told them what had happened. So she actually had a couple of
Few
witnesses,
markers. Yeah.
exactly, who were able to go to court and testify. Yeah, she came to me on such and such a day and said that this had happened. So a lot of times it's just if they actually, but again, a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They, they're afraid or they're embarrassed or, so they, it takes a while to even process it. So there's a lot of issues about that, but, so when you start talking about, criminal prosecution from something for 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, I mean, we work with children and, kids who were, who want to come back, 10, 15, 20 years later, and want to go after someone. And we've been successful in some cases. We work with the prosecutors to see what we can do to, get any kind of information that's out there, talk to the clients, try to find out if there's, like I said, if there's anybody who is collaterally there that they said anything to, if they reported it to their parents, if they did this or they did that, So those are the kind of things that you kind of look at. But
Interesting.
there's more of I think there's more of a reluctance because your standard of evidence or clear and convincing when you're talking about criminal as opposed to preponderance when you're talking about civil. So in some ways it's easier to bring a civil case because your standard is not as high. rights too. That's another piece of it. But I think, doesn't mean that it can't happen. Prosecutors have success sometimes. We've had success sometimes, with, with it. So it just kind of depends. It depends on the prosecutor. It really depends on all of the interactions. And like I said, if you've got someone that you reported it to at the time or something like that, that's always helpful if you can remember that, or if there was anybody else around or something. So, but that's the thing with criminal. It's just, the higher standard makes it harder sometimes. So.
Got it. Good information though. Good information. And really interesting context as far as like having told people when it happened, even if it's, someone in your family or, her friends or what have you, because at least that's someone that, it bothered you enough that something happened, and there's at least someone that could recall that you provided that information. So that's really interesting. Emily, was there anything that you wanted to add to this topic?
No, not at the moment, actually.
Okay, no worries.
If I could just add quickly, one of the things that it can also be helpful, and Emily and I, have chatted about this, is that if an individual, files like with a county commissioner for a criminal action against an individual, maybe they decide not to bring that case because there's a lack of evidence. As Pauline stated, burden of proof for a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. So you're thinking 99%, no other reasonable, options as far as what happened. Maybe they don't bring it. Civil case by preponderance of evidence, you're talking about like 50.1%, right? More likely than not. So definitely a much easier standard. But let's say, 5 or 6 individuals go to the commissioner's office and want to file a criminal complaint, and they keep seeing the same name. So maybe individually those folks don't have a case with a lot of evidence, but collectively they have a case that can be built.
Class action.
Yeah, so it may not happen quickly, but you never know who else is out there and who else is filing, something similar based on a particular individual, because as we've seen, there's typically not just one victim.
Right. Clearly, yeah. And that's hence the Keogh case, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it took look how long it took for anything to get going, and we're still pushing, We just now got the names of the people who are still kind of out there, are still alive.
That are still alive. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just an ongoing thing, but
and it was the boys and the girls, because it's that case is against the archdiocese, which was in charge of male and female high schools. Like they were not, I don't know, is segregated the word for that? I don't know. They were separated based on gender.
Separated. They didn't
separated. I'm like, I've been on the job too long.
We're talking when I went to Catholic school, so you're talking about a long time ago. But yes, they didn't usually, and even the colleges were. I actually was one of the people who Loyola College was all male, and I went to Mount. So I'm telling you my age. Went to Mount St. Agnes for a year, and then they actually closed Mount St. Agnes and sent all the girls to Loyola. And the funniest story about that was there was like one lady's bathroom on the whole campus because it was all boys. And so when people had to go to the bathroom, they didn't think about putting in girls' bathrooms.
That's when long
it was a very
bathroom lines were created.
About halfway through the semester, they figured out they had to change some of the bathrooms to be girls.
Yeah, maybe that would be a good move. Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, yes.
So yeah, no, great information, Lauren. Great add to that. And the last thing I guess we can touch on really quickly is the hate crimes. I definitely wanted to, like I mentioned, we did do. I had a feeling that we wouldn't run on time. We did get a little bit of a late start. but also I think that our topics are just such a lot of information to share that people might not know. And it's so important to make sure that those are, complete in sharing and thoroughly discussed. Is hate crimes. I did mention that we had that previous lunch and learn. The rules to charging criminally and proof was something. So hate crimes, of course, LBGTQ is included in that community. If you think that a hate crime is happening, Pauline, I'll let you start off on this one. She's our resident expert on this. What should people do if they feel like a hate crime is occurring? Like how do you prove that it's based on one of the specified areas?
One of the specified areas. Well, I think that, I think sometimes it is hard. I think sometimes it is hard to prove. Sometimes, you would, people look at, the different, you can look at gender, you can look at, different sexes, you can look at color, you can look at, so you've got various and different categories. Okay. But, the biggest thing is, I think, if you think that something is going on, if you're being harassed or whatever, in Maryland, there was some changing of the law and changing of words to make it easier for the prosecutors to be able to prove hate crimes. We did that a couple of years ago in the legislature. So now it's a little easier to prove it. So they seem to be having a little more ability to charge and actually get convictions, because in the beginning, our case, the judge, we went through the entire trial, and then the judge dropped the hate crime because he said he didn't think that there was enough evidence presented. So
that was the Collins case.
that was
right?
a Collins case, yeah. And so, they dropped it at the end of the trial, after, before the trial went to jury, he dropped that part of it. But I think when you talk about hate crimes, you talk about something that is directed at a specific group, whatever that specific group is, whether it's, like I said, if it has to do with color, it has to do nationality, it has to do with, we had the Asian, hate crimes, we have Jewish hate crime, we have, lesbian hate crime, we got, trans, I know there've been so many murders of trans people, in the last couple of years, which is something you don't hear a whole lot about. You really don't. And it's something we're interested in, but it's not talked about a lot either. But it really isn't. And the numbers in Baltimore City are fairly high, I think, on murders of trans people. So but anyway, so so it's directed at a certain a group. And like I said, you have to be able to prove that it is directed at you specifically for that particular reason. Okay. So that's part of the deal with it. And I would guess that the community that we're talking about today would see a lot of hate crimes. I don't know.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And I think typically what we end up talking about the most is whether something would qualify as a hate crime. So, first, just the understanding that it's a subcategory of crimes, not a unique type of crime. So
Right.
the actual action has to already be a crime. And
Right.
so what we'll see is that people are victims of what they call like hate bias incidents. So verbal abuse and slurs, or passing out, anti-LGBTQ plus
Yeah,
literature.
propaganda and stuff. Right.
Right. So, and those can sometimes be traumatizing, but
Sure.
unfortunately doesn't give you an outlet in criminal law. Not, generally. So we really, kind of focus on what should folks do? How can they, kind of stand up for their rights? We've seen a lot of issues with some of the LGBTQ plus organizations on college campuses having to deal with some very, right organizations that, will protest or yell slurs or, and I think they are, very well informed about what they, pushing, the limit to, what is legal action, what is First Amendment protected speech.
Right.
Unfortunately puts the universities and colleges in this position to, agree with them. Like, it is protected speech, and so we just have to inform folks and help them to, how to keep yourself safe, how to, report, incidents, even if it doesn't rise to the level of a crime, just to show kind of a pattern.
Right.
Then if it does become a crime, that will maybe help you prove that, that
You can
that it
pull
was
it into
motivated,
the
right?
hate
That it
crime.
was a hate
Exactly.
crime, that there should be increased penalties for their behavior when there
Right.
was finally an assault or some other destruction of property or other type of action. But it is
Right.
it's a really difficult kind of tightrope to walk, when you're having to deal with, hate and bias incidents without being able to, kind of have the police called or have someone, penalized for those behaviors.
I know it. You're right. I mean, I think, someone is attacked or someone is assaulted or beat up. You do have the assault. So you start out with the assault and then you try to, from looking at that assault, it determine why was the person assaulted? Were they assaulted because they were Black? Were they assaulted because they were lesbian or whatever? So you hope that out of that assault, you can get some reasoning, which may at some point push it to the level. But you are 100% right. You've got to start with the basic harassment. If they're, yelling, screaming, that kind of thing. And then, and then right now, I feel like, you have so many people who are out there trying to make it wrong to be different. You know what I'm saying? The fact that people, everybody wants to legislate, all this stuff that's going on in the schools in Florida and all this stuff. Nobody should be different. Everybody should be completely the same. We shouldn't discuss the fact that there are gay people and not, or lesbian people or anything like that. Children shouldn't know those things. Kids aren't stupid. They know that. They have friends. Frankly, if we would treat people the way kids treat people, we'd be in a hell of a lot better position than we are now. So the idiots that are out there. But you're seeing more and more of this. Oh no, we can't talk about people being different or people having different lifestyles or doing different things because somehow that's an attack on us, which makes absolutely no sense. So it's so close-minded. So, but it makes the environment worse and worse, for the folks that are, in these situations, because it just makes their whole existence more uncomfortable and it's not fair. So,
Yeah,
it really is, it's really frustrating to see. Makes me angry, but
people are mean. People are just mean.
I don't know.
So definitely I think spreading awareness is the way to go. And all we can do is change our little parts of the world. One of the things that I talked to the ladies about before was if there are people in the LBGTQ community that feel more comfortable with going to Free State because of who they are and what they represent, we're happy to receive information from them if we can help in criminal capacities. We just want people to know that we're a resource as well to this community. We might not be shouting and yelling, and maybe, we do tend to our posts do tend to be mostly about homicides. But, we do all criminal cases. Right. And, there, it could be, identity theft to hate crimes. Like, there's not anywhere that we want to delve as far as that's concerned, and just making sure that people know that we're here. And like I said, as long as we get people and we can help people in our different aspects of resources, I think we're, moving in the right direction. So.
Well, what I would say, Lauren, you're talking about people going to the commissioner and having a problem. We've got attorneys all across the state in all different jurisdictions. So if people want to go to the commissioner and file charges, and if they need an attorney to go with them to do that, we're happy to do that. We do that with clients all the time. So if they're getting pushback, because some of them do, you try to file something with the commissioner. Oh, I don't want to, we're not going to take that. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. Please send them to us. We're happy to help, and try and help, help them how to word things, how to get things, so it's quote acceptable for the, powers that be or whatever, so, we're happy to do that, and if they have a concern or, if they have been called as a witness or they're afraid to have to go to court or testify or anything, please have them get in touch with us. That's why we're there. So,
Thank you for
anything
that,
we can do to
Pauline.
help.
I think that I started these after staff meetings. I would be so I would write down little notes because our staff meetings all advocates and attorneys, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, so what does this mean? And for me, it's I can't even imagine going into file my own protective order or do this, because it's so it just seems like it's normal for you guys to know that because that's what you do, whereas that's not what I do. I'm the community person, so definitely have the resources available, and MCVRC, we provide resources regardless of income. So in closing, I'll let Lauren go first. Anything that you wanted to add before we hop off?
No, I just wanted to say that, again, I really just reiterate that Free State is here as a resource. And although we only handle civil cases, we will walk you through the process as far as a criminal case and refer you to, various other resources that can help. We want folks to start with a place of, education and understanding and knowing your rights and knowing, basically how you should be treated and support individuals, and especially the folks that are most marginalized in our community, our children, transgender individuals. We just want to be here to support you. And I would say to allies, please feel free to reach out. We have various, ways in which everyone can volunteer, everyone can help. We're coming into Pride season. I'll let Emily talk a little bit about where Free State will be. But if you want to have a great time on a Saturday or Sunday or a Friday evening, very easy to follow us and come on out and have a good time at our table and just talk to people in the community. And I think that's the way in which we kind of level the playing field and we get information out that you are not alone. Basically, something's just not happening to you in a bubble. You have resources at your discretion.
Right. I think that's so important for them to know that you're there. That's the most important thing that there can be.
Yes, absolutely, Lauren. So Free State will be at around 30 Pride events this summer all over Maryland. We'll be in Western Maryland, the Eastern Shore, Central Maryland, and we'll be at events in Frederick, Glen Burnie, Annapolis. We'll be all over Maryland. So we'd love to have people come out and volunteer with us. What that could be marching in the parade with us, tabling with us, but we would love to have you guys come out and participate. Free State is here as a resource for the LGBTQ community in Maryland. So we are taking a variety of civil cases and we can provide direct legal services as far as updating your name change. If you'd like to get your name changed, we provide pro bono legal services for qualifying Marylanders. We can help with the name change, gender administrative updates thereafter, as well as a variety of family law matters, divorce, adoption. We can examine child custody matters. So we're taking a variety of legal cases and we love to assist you guys. And we're here as a resource.
That's cool. We have a lot of people who call about custody and stuff like that. So that's really good
Good to know. Yeah. All right, Pauline, was there anything that you wanted to add before
Well,
we
just
hop
say,
off?
I think, certainly we can work together, and like I said, anything we can do to help, in terms of, we have advocates, we have, who can work with them if, especially if you're talking about them being involved in any kind of criminal justice stuff, because that's a scary place for people to be, And so, if they're if they're a witness, if they're subpoenaed, if they are a victim of a crime or whatever, we're happy to do whatever we could do to help them. And, we work with, everybody anybody who's a victim of crime in the state, and anybody who's a federal victim. And even if you don't live in the state, if you are a victim in the state, we also assist all of them. So, there's no we're nonprofit, there's no requirement in terms of financial or anything else. If you're a victim of a crime in the state, give us a call and we'll see what we can do to help you. The other thing is, it's not just about representing people in court. My attorneys are the most creative people on earth. So if you have a problem, we will figure out a solution, bend the law backwards, upwards, and inside out to figure out what we can do to help you. So, spend a lot of time in appellate court arguing cases so that we can get the laws better in this state, which they need to be for everybody. So, this is really nice to meet you guys.
Thanks so much for you guys joining us today. I'm super excited that we did this kind of leading up to Pride. If you at home have Pride events, please, reach out. I guess they want to just make sure everyone's feeling all the pride that they need to feel. I'll be going to grab my free mom hug shirt shortly. Again, Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, we provide free legal services to anyone who's been a victim of crime throughout Maryland. And we do not have, regardless of income. And I just wanted to give a special shout out to Angie Fulton. Her brother is one of the first cases that I heard of. It happened in the 80s, Pauline. Stevie Slayman, he was killed some years ago and left on the side of the road for being gay. And so,
yeah,
tears are falling. But shout out to you, Slayman family, thinking about you today and during Pride. So thank you guys so much. And I will talk to you all soon.
And Emily, if you could send us a listing of where you're doing these events. Because like I said, we're all around the state, so I'll send them out to the attorneys and also everybody will know. Okay?
Yes, Pauline, absolutely. I'll get that sent over to you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Okay.
you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take
Take
care.
care.